All of us have areas that we struggle in. We make mistakes and do things that we know we shouldn't. We told ourselves we weren't going to give in to that temptation anymore, but we did it again. We lost our temper, didn't keep our word, maybe compromised with some friends. It's easy to go around feeling guilty and condemned, wrong on the inside, thinking, I can't believe I'm still struggling in this same area. Voices will whisper, God's never going to bless you. You can't get it right. You don't deserve it. Just sit on the sidelines. We think we have to have a perfect performance for God to bless us. Once we get rid of all these weaknesses, once I overcome in these areas that I'm struggling in, then I'll have God's favor. Then I'll feel good about myself. But the Scripture says God searches the earth to show Himself strong in people whose hearts are turned perfect toward Him. God is not looking for people who have a perfect performance, perfect behavior, people who never make a mistake. He's looking for people who have a perfect heart turned toward Him. That means you may make mistakes, but you have a desire to please Him. Deep down, you want to honor Him with your life. It's your heart that matters. God looks on the inside. He is more pleased with someone with a right heart that makes mistakes every once in a while than someone with a wrong heart and performs perfectly all the time. We see this in the Scripture. The Pharisees kept all the religious rules. They prayed at the right time, gave the exact amount required, went to great lengths to perform the religious ceremonies exactly like they were supposed to. They had the performance part down. The problem was their heart wasn't right. They were self-righteous, proud, critical, and even though they performed perfectly, Jesus said to them, you're like a bunch of whitewashed tombs. You look good on the outside, but on the inside, there's a major problem. When Jesus chose His 12 disciples, it was just the opposite. He didn't choose people who had it all together. He chose a tax collector. They were known for being dishonest. He chose fishermen. They used bad language, lived a rough lifestyle. He chose Thomas, a doubter. It looked like he'd made a mistake. These weren't the most qualified, disciplined, upstanding people. These were people who had flaws and weaknesses, people who came out of dysfunction, people who were not raised in a religious background. But what God can see that others cannot see is the heart. People look on the outside at the performance, the behavior, the background. God looks beyond all that. He knows it's the heart that matters. He said to these disciples, I chose you not because you have it all together, not because you perform perfectly. No, I handpicked you because I can see your heart is turned toward me. God is saying the same thing to you. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be listening if you didn't have a heart turned toward God. Your performance may not be perfect. Your behavior, your attitude, your character may need some improvement. We all do. But just like with the disciples, God is saying, I handpicked you because your heart is sincere. Your heart is to do the right thing. Your heart is pliable and moldable, so I'm going to show myself strong in your life. Now the key is you have to learn to accept yourself while you're in the process of changing. It doesn't do any good to go around beating yourself up because of flaws and weaknesses, living guilty and condemned, because you're not where you think you should be in life. The Scripture says God changes us from glory to glory. You may not realize it, but you're in a phase of glory right now. Learn to enjoy the glory that you're in while God is changing you and taking you to the next level of glory. Too often, we're not going to feel good about who we are until our behavior gets better, until we break the bad habit, until we control our temper. Then we'll start accepting ourselves. The problem with this approach is there will always be something that's not right. There will always be some reason to feel wrong about who we are. You have to accept yourself right where you are, faults and all. You are not a finished product. God is the potter, you are the clay, He's still working on you. He goes at His own pace. Nothing you can do to make it happen any faster. He knows what's best. And the sooner you say, God, my life is in your hands. Not just my goals and dreams, but my flaws, my weaknesses, these areas that I struggle in. God, I know only you can give me the grace to overcome. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to work with you. But in the meantime, I'm going to accept myself and enjoy the glory that I'm in. And I've learned if you'll keep your heart turned toward God, your performance will catch up. The disciples started off rough. They had a lot to overcome, but they ended up men of great character who touched the world. Peter had a problem with cursing, using bad language. He didn't change overnight. I'm sure there were plenty of times he got upset, fell back into that bad habit. Remember, it happened the night before Jesus was crucified. A young lady saw him and said, that's a disciple. I saw him with Jesus. Peter started cursing her out, let her have it, went right back into his old ways. He had been a disciple for a long time, but he still wasn't perfect. You would think God would say, Peter, you're a headache, man. You make me work overtime. I'm going to find somebody else. No, as long as your heart is turned toward God, He's going to keep working with you. God does not expect us to be perfect, but He does expect us to keep trying, to keep growing. You have to stay pliable. Be willing to change. When you make mistakes, don't stay down on yourself. Get back up and go again. Peter blew it big time, but he repented, asked for forgiveness, and kept moving forward. He had to fight off the guilt, the condemnation, the voices telling him he was a failure, that he was never going to change. He didn't believe those lies. He knew he was on the potter's wheel. God was making him and molding him. He was in a process of changing. Here's the key. Peter accepted himself even though he had some issues. His performance wasn't perfect, but he kept his heart perfect, turned toward God. Why don't you stop beating yourself up because you don't perform perfectly all the time and start accepting yourself because your heart is right? When you live guilty and condemned, feeling wrong on the inside, it only makes you do worse. It takes a mature attitude to say, I am happy with who I am, even though I'm not where I want to be. I still got these issues. I still struggle in some areas, but I know I'm growing. I know I'm improving. My heart is turned toward God, so I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to enjoy where I am while I'm in the process of being changed. But too many people, they go around feeling wrong on the inside. They're so focused on their flaws, their weaknesses, what they're not. They don't like who they are. If you don't like yourself, nobody else is going to like you. You project on others the way you feel about yourself. If you feel guilty, lousy, condemned, mad at yourself because you're not far enough along, that's not only going to hold you back, you're not going to have good relationships. Quit taking inventory of everything that's wrong with you. You may have a lot wrong, but you have a lot more right with you. When God made you, He wasn't having a bad day. You are not a mistake. You have been fearfully and wonderfully made. In fact, when God created you, He stepped back and said, that was good. He calls you a masterpiece. Quit living like you're ordinary, mediocre, average, when in fact, you're one of a kind. You're a prized possession. You're wearing a crown of favor. Paul said in Ephesians, put on the breastplate of God's approval. Every day you need to say, Father, thank you that you approve me. Thank you that you are proud of me. When you put on this approval, chains of inferiority, of low self-esteem, guilt, and condemnation, those chains are broken. There's a freedom when you know you've been approved by God. You're His prized possession. He created you in His own image. Don't go through life being against yourself. Well, Joel, God doesn't approve me. I don't make a lot of mistakes and I don't do everything right. I'm still struggling with my temper. You're not a finished product. God is still working on you. He doesn't say, I'll approve you when you perform perfectly. I'll approve you when you get it all together. No, He approves you right where you are. He may not approve all of your behavior, but He approves you. God said you were good before you did one good thing. You don't have to keep working trying to gain God's approval. You already have it.